Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, truly life-changing concept from the legendary Carl Jung. We're going to look at exactly why you feel this constant nagging need to justify yourself to everyone around you, and more importantly, how hitting the brakes on that habit can completely rewrite your reality. Let's get right into it. So, let's dive in with a question that honestly might feel a little uncomfortable. Why do you feel the compulsion to justify your choices, your emotions, and even your absences or mood changes? We do this all the time, right? We often tell ourselves we're just being polite or empathetic, or that we're just showing consideration for the people in our lives. But listen, while this habit might seem completely harmless, Jungian psychology throws a total curveball here. It reveals that compulsive explanation is actually a really sophisticated form of submission. Think about the last time you over-explained why you were just 5 minutes late. It's essentially a desperate attempt to seek permission to exist. When you're constantly explaining yourself, you are unconsciously telling the other person, hey, I can only exist if you allow it.
Today, we are going to safely map out the psyche to understand exactly where this comes from. We'll be covering the urge to explain, the childhood wound, the cost of pleasing, building internal authority, and finally, the power of silence. All right, part 1, the urge to explain, seeking permission to exist. If you're an adult who constantly explains himself, you're basically stuck in an invisible theater where the audience holds way more power than you, the protagonist. This compulsion is a deep, unconscious attempt to avoid abandonment, judgment, or rejection. By trying to micromanage how others perceive you, you're really just trying to guarantee your own emotional security. It's like you believe that if they can just understand your reasons, there's no way they'll reject you.
Which brings us to part 2, the childhood wound, where it all begins. This whole thing usually starts with a psychic wound formed really early in life. When a child's subjective experience is systematically disqualified by the adults around them, it causes some real, lasting damage. I mean, imagine expressing genuine sadness and just being told you're being dramatic, or showing anger and getting labeled as difficult or disrespectful. When a kid reveals fear and is met with disdain or sarcasm, they internalize a super dangerous message about their own feelings. They internalize this exact heartbreaking belief: what I feel only has value if others understand, approve, or allow it. To survive that kind of emotional invalidation, the child builds a defense mechanism. They start justifying every single emotion just to feel safe, and man, they carry that deep into adulthood. You basically learn that if you explain your feelings well enough, maybe, just maybe, you won't be punished or ignored.
Let's move to part 3, the cost of pleasing, a silent betrayal.
The absolute kicker here is that this isn't just a quirky habit, it's a continuous, highly corrosive act of self-betrayal. Carl Jung understood that abandoning yourself doesn't usually happen in one giant explosion. No, it happens through tiny, daily concessions where you leave a little piece of your soul behind. It's forcing a laugh at an unfunny joke just to seem sociable. It's saying yes when every fiber of your being screams no just so you don't look selfish. Or it's wrapping your totally valid anger in extreme rationality because you're terrified someone will call you immature. Jung saw our inner world as somewhat divided. Think of the ego as your social mask. It's a servant of external acceptance that constantly shapeshifts to be whatever the room wants it to be. On the flip side, you have the self, which is your true, symbolic center of authentic intuition and wholeness. When you over-explain, the ego is essentially burying the self. You are trading your inner confidence for crippling doubt, all to maintain a totally fake sense of social harmony. Jung actually argued that this internal fragmentation is a massive driver of neuroses. Why? Because your soul is literally screaming to be heard, but you keep silencing it to fit in. That's when you start getting hit with chronic anxiety, existential crises, deep feelings of emptiness, and just incredibly low self-esteem. As long as you're waiting for a permission slip to act or feel, you are playing a side character in someone else's story.
Okay, let's get into part 4. Building internal authority, reclaiming the self.
So, how do we break the cycle? By building internal authority. This is the ability to validate your own subjective experience without needing anyone else to understand or approve of it. Cultivating this shifts the entire center of gravity in your psyche. You stop looking outward for validation and finally start looking inward. It is that crucial moment you stop asking, are they going to understand me? And start declaring, it doesn't matter, because this is true for me. And this is the absolute cornerstone of Jung's philosophy, individuation. It's this profound psychological process where a human being finally, truly becomes who they are. Practically speaking, it means realizing you don't need to ask for permission to exist, even if becoming whole means you're going to end up disappointing some people along the way.
Now, I won't sugarcoat it. This awakening comes with a price. As Jung pointed out, individuation requires traversing the desert of inner solitude. It brings the really uncomfortable pain of holding your ground and saying no without drowning in guilt. It means walking away from a conversation without explaining why, because you owe absolutely nothing to anyone to exist. It's tough for sure, because you are finally facing that deep-seated fear of abandonment head-on.
But the shift is totally existential. You move from speaking to be approved, where you're practically begging for understanding and constantly negotiating your own truth, to speaking to be true. You start offering your truth as a gift, a purely authentic expression. Your communication transforms from this exhausting, desperate performance into a powerful, rooted assertion of who you are. Which leads us perfectly into our final section, Part 5, The Power of Silence, a Silent Revolution. Secure silence is like a stone wall that completely wrecks manipulation. When you stop justifying yourself, your silence isn't just an empty void or an absence of a response. It's a massive, heavy presence of authority. It instantly deactivates psychological control. People who used to feed off your doubt and insecurity, they suddenly hit a brick wall. Your silence, loud and clear, communicates that you owe zero explanations for being exactly who you are.
And when you actually deploy this kind of secure silence, the shift in your life is wild. First, manipulative people completely lose the reactivity they rely on to control you. Second, those fragile, one-sided relationships that only worked because you were submitting, they crumble. And finally, you start attracting connections built on mutual respect and genuine affinity. Jung noted that individuation almost always requires ruptures, but those distancing moments aren't losses. They are profound liberation. You're just filtering out the people who only liked you because you were easy to control.
When you do this, you finally step into psychological integrity. You communicate, but you don't try to convince. You confidently occupy space instead of begging for a tiny corner of it. You act out of internal alignment, not insecurity. And you trust your feelings without needing a spreadsheet of rational evidence to prove them. When you live like this, you emanate this magnetic energy of coherence. You force the world to treat you with immense respect, simply because you are finally treating yourself with respect. You're no longer sending out the signal that you can be pushed around. As we wrap up this explainer today, I really want you to confront something right now. What is the one justification you keep repeating to people, but deep down you desperately want to let go of? Think about it. Make the choice right now to just drop it. Take that first massive step toward true psychological integrity. You do not need a permission slip to exist. Thanks so much for learning with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.